In this video, I'm going to go over the steps for creating a raster, aka bitmap image from vector graphics. Or another way to look at this would be to take a vector graphic, which is typically Illustrator files, and turning that into an image. Again, I will show the steps first and then get into the why in the quiz questions later. There's three general steps here. So the first step is to resize the artwork and the artboard with a goal size in mind. Specifically, in our case, we are going to create a JPEG as our image, and we are going to maximize a web area of 1600 pixels wide by 1200 pixels tall. Now, it's very important to follow all of the steps because you are not trying to resize your image to make it exactly 1600 by 1200, because typically that would involve stretching, but rather to maximize this area, as I will clearly show. In the assignment for creating this JPEG, I should have given you specific instructions of what is the starting point. And the starting point for your file is typically what you turned in for the project. So using our hypothetical Mexico flyer as an example, we're going to go back to the last version that we made where everything was ready to go. Everything was 100% correct in your files. I'm not going to the turn it into Steve file for the Illustrator file. You could, if you were on a school computer and you did not have the fonts you need, then you would have to go to the outlined version, which would be the one that's inside of the Turn into Steve folder. Now, if you're working on completing an AI file and a JPEG at the same time, do not get them confused. First, complete the AI file, save it into that folder. So in here in Turn into Steve, you'd have the AI file. And then once that's completed, you go ahead and you open up your last working file. And then another thing that you want to do inside of your overall folder is make a new folder called Delete Soon, because we are going to create a temporary file to export this image. Then we're going to go to our last working file, which we shouldn't need to do this, but if any changes were made or whatever, we'd do a one last file save. Then we would do a file save as. Now we're going to put this in the delete soon, and just so we know what's going on here, we can add raster to the end of this, and we'll go ahead and save it. This is a very important step. If you forget this, you're going to probably come close to the size it's supposed to be, but be off by a little bit. And that is to turn off the bleeds, because what happens is Illustrator will add this little bit extra between your work and the bleed to the document, and you'll never get the right file size. So what you do, if you're working with a bleed, what you should be, in the rare case that you're not, you won't have to do this step, but you go up to File, you go to Document Setup, and then you just zero out the bleed. Make sure this is linked so they all go to 0. Click OK, and now you can see that the bleed, that little red outline for the bleed, is gone. Then the next step you want to do is you want to find Scale on here, and you can see right now my last tool I had selected was the rotate tool. So depending on which tool you had last selected, you'll click, you'll go down, and you want to make sure scale tool is what's showing there. Then you're going to go over the top of the scale and you're going to double click, and then you want to check scale, stroke, and effects. That way, if your artwork contains any strokes, when you resize the image, the stroke will scale with it so that you don't end up with distorted work. Now, our next multi-step process is to make a new artboard in artwork that is the size that you need for the bitmap image. Now, one thing that helps is if you have stuff in here that you don't need, get rid of it. In the last video, I covered how to unlock layers and sublayers. Make sure that you've done that so that you can delete anything that you need to. And then if you have an artboard that you don't need, go to the artboard tool, click on that particular artboard and select delete. So our first new step here is going to be to create a new artboard that is the general overall size that we want, which is 1600 pixels wide by 1200 pixels tall. To help us do that, we are going to bring out the rulers and change to pixels, because right now you're probably in inches. I recommend you learn Command R as a shortcut for bringing out the rulers. And let's see, let me just make sure I'm in here. So if I go Command R, then what you'll see is the rulers show up along the top and the left edge. On a PC, it might be Control R, but you can also go up to View and then find Show Rulers. So it's down near the bottom here. Yeah, it's actually rulers. And then if the rulers are there, you'll have hide rulers. And then if they're not, you'll have show rulers as an option here. Now what you do is you put your cursor in the ruler. And then once it's in there, control click or right click and select pixels. Then grab the artboard tool and start a good distance away to the right from your work and click and drag out. And what you want to look is that you're getting pretty close to something that's about 1600 pixels wide by 1200 pixels tall. Don't try to get it exact, just somewhere kind of close. And then what you'll do is you'll come up to properties and you'll just double click in the width and put 1600 and then hit the tab key. And that'll put you down into the height. Make sure that this is not linked. That's linked. Make sure it's not linked. It looks like that. And then you can go ahead and type in 1200. And so just double click or double check, I should say, that you have 1600 and 1200 showing for the width and height respectively. All right, we've covered all these instructions. Now we're going to move on to this one. The idea here is that we are going to copy this over into this area here, into this new artboard, and then we're going to make our work larger so that it either touches the top and the bottom or touches the left and the right. But that gets a little complicated when we have a bleed on here. So what we want to do is make a rectangle over the top here. And I would make sure in your layers that if you have multiple layers that you're on the very top layer. And then you're going to go ahead and you're going to pick a color here that's clearly different than anything else you have. And I usually choose something kind of bright and garish. And then what I want to do is in view, make sure I have smart guides on. And then I'm going to zoom in on my top left-hand corner, take the rectangle tool, and I'm going to click right in there in the intersect. And then I'm going to start to draw this out. And then I'll grab the selection tool, click on it to activate it. And I'm going to keep resizing here, but I want to be very, very accurate about it so that I'm touching the top left corner and the bottom right corner. All right, so you can see that's a pretty accurate selection, and then you may want to cruise on back to the top corner and just make sure everything looks good. I'm going to Command minus to move out a little bit, and then with everything unlocked, I'm going to draw a marquee around here with the selection tool. I'm going to hold down the Option key. I'm going to click and drag. I'm going to release the mouse, then release the Option key. Now I have a copy of this. Now, what I want to do temporarily here is lock all this stuff together so I can't accidentally have these pieces shifting apart. So I'll go to Object and I'll go to Group. And that made a single group out of here. Now, what I want to do is that pink area, I want to make sure that that is touching either the top or the left, or if I'm not sure whether it's going to be taller or wider, I can do both at the same time. And then I really want to be as zoomed in as I possibly can here to see what's going on. Very important that I hold down the shift key when I do this so that I don't accidentally stretch anything. And it's also very important that I release the mouse before I release the shift key. So you see how I've got that so that the pink area is right exactly at the bottom there. Then I'm going to release the mouse, release the shift key. I'll command minus out just to verify that I'm still indeed in the right place up here. No, it looks like that moved a little bit on me. So I will hold down the shift key, repeat that till I'm touching right there. And since it's obvious that it is going to touch the top and the bottom, that's what I'm focusing on. So I want to make sure that this pink is right at the very top here and that the pink is at the very bottom here. And now it is. Now, your situation might be different. You might have a wider image and it might be touching the sides. And I'll show that in just a second, but let's just complete this step. So back here in Illustrator, I'm going to command minus out a little bit. And the idea here is that we now want to change the artboard so that in this case, with it being taller than it is wide, I now need to change the artboard so that it touches the pink on each side. And just to make that a little bit easier, I'm just going to move this over a little bit, holding down the shift key so that I can see what's going on both the left and the right of the artboard. So I go to the artboard tool and I want to really zoom in here. And I'm going to click on this handle here and I'm going to go to the pink. Now, in no circumstance will you change the opposite measurement. So we'll just stick with the case where it's taller for a second. When I go to properties and I have the artboard tool clicked on, I can see that I did not touch the height. The height remains at 1200. The width goes to whatever it goes to. So let me just pause a second and show you what would happen if you had something that was wider than tall. Okay, so every step has been the same, performed up until now. The only difference is I just happen to have a work here that is going to touch the sides, but I do everything exactly the same. I come up here, I take so that that funny looking color that I put over the top of my work touches the very top left. Then I get down over here and I make sure that I'm holding down the shift key, and then, whoops, got away from me there. Gonna have to zoom in here a little bit more again. Okay, so you can see we're perfect there, and when we zoom out, you can see that what happened was we definitely touched the sides. And then we want to make sure that the only thing that we're going to change is the top and the bottom. So again, we're going to zoom in. And so what you should be guessing is going to happen is when we look at the size of the artboard, in this case, it's going to lock into exactly 1600 wide, but the height will be the variable in this case. So I go to properties and you can see I'm at exactly 1600 wide and the height is going to be something different. So one of those two scenarios has to happen. You're either going to touch the top and the bottom, and in which case you change the width and leave the height alone, or you're going to touch the left and the right, in which case you change the top and the bottom and leave the width alone. Okay, we are all the way up to this very last step here in section 1, and that is to get rid of that helper rectangle. So I'm going to select my object, my entire object here, which is grouped together. I'm going to go to ungroup from the object menu and then click away, click back on just that top thing and delete. And now you can clearly see here that we are bigger than the artboard, but that has to do with the fact that we started with a bleed, which is perfect because if the work you're putting in here is just a little bit too small, when you export it, as I'll show in an example in a little bit, you'll end up with a screaming little sliver of white. In the next video, I will start with part 2 of 3 and continue from there.